order the Monday, February 22nd, Maplewood City Council Manager Workshop. City Clerk Sint, would you please do the roll call for us?
Yes. Councilmember Juniman.
Here.
Councilmember Knutson.
Here.
Councilmember Villavicencio.
Here.
Councilmember Cave.
Here.
Mayor Abrams.
I'm here as well. Thank you very much. Council members, is there a motion to approve the agenda for our workshop tonight?
So move.
Second.
Moved by Juniman, seconded by Knutson, the motion to approve the agenda. And is there any further discussion? Hearing none, then let's go to a vote. And the vote tonight, the order for discussion and for votes will be as follows. Councilmember Cave, Councilmember Juniman, Councilmember Knutson, and then Councilmember Villavicencio. So in terms of the vote for the approval of the agenda, Councilmember Cave.
Aye.
Councilmember Juniman.
Aye.
Councilmember Knutson.
Aye.
Councilmember Villavicencio.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. We have no unfinished business tonight. We have one item of new business, and that is the South Maplewood Century Avenue redevelopment, also known as the Ponds at Battle Creek update. And tonight, Jeff Thompson is going to be doing the staff report, and then we're going to hear from Perkins and Will. And then I see Commissioner Victoria Reinhardt with Ramsey County is also present, and then she has some comments I think that she would like to add as well. So with that, Mr. Thompson, I'm going to turn it over to you for your staff report.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. Thank you. I just did want to do just a very brief introduction and background before I turn it over to John Slack with Perkins and Will. But just so some of the background is back in August of 2020, the city entered into a cooperative agreement with Ramsey County to undertake a community engagement and planning process for 2 county-owned properties in South Maplewood. The first of the properties being the Ponds at Battle Creek, which it was a result of the county board's decision, previous decision in 2019 to close the golf course after the 2020 golf season. And then the second property that's owned by the county is an unused or vacant property along Century Avenue that's adjacent to the correctional facility. As part of that cooperative agreement, it included engaging Perkins and Will, a consultant, to lead the community engagement and planning process. You know, it's one unique component of the arrangement for this planning effort. Typically, for other planning efforts, the city kind of leads them, but this was done under the cooperative agreement with Ramsey County, which really was a result of kind of the varying roles in the city and the county have for this area and the properties. So the county owns these properties and therefore is the ultimate decision maker for the county's use of the properties, whether that's a golf course, park, or other county facilities or operations. Or they would also make the decision around potentially selling the property to other owners and for other uses. The city's role is that, as with all properties in Maplewood, the city has land use authority, and we do that through our 2040 comprehensive plan, as well as our zoning and land use regulations. And so this process is not amending our comp plan. Any changes or future amendments would go through a separate amendment process that would be separate and distinct from this current process. Really, the purpose of this community engagement and planning effort is to provide both the county and the city with a strategy to guide the respective decision making from the county board level on their role and also in the city's land use authority, a framework for us, both of these parties, both of these entities to make those decisions in the future. So John Slack with Perkins and Will is here this evening. We are still in the process. The process is not wrapped up. We're kind of right in the middle of it now. But as we have done, we just wanted to give the full council an update on where we were at in the project, what we've learned so far as part of the engagement and planning effort, and certainly answer any questions that the full council may have. As a workshop and informational update, we're not requesting any formal action from the council here this evening. So with that, Mayor, I don't know if you want to turn it over to Commissioner Reinhardt or just directly onto John Slack. I know he has a presentation to walk through for the council.
Thank you. My preference would be to have John Flack with Perkins and Will make his presentation first, and then we'll hear from Commissioner Reinhardt.
Perfect. Buddy, it's a pleasure to be here.
Good evening.
I'm going to share my screen here, and just want to make sure. Can everybody see that?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So I have maybe about 35 slides here, and this is a summary of where we're at in this planning process to date, going back approximately a little bit over 4 months. And so I'm going to give you a high-level summary of everything that we're talking about at this point, and then talk about next steps, and then be available for questions. So let's get started here. So these are the things I'll talk about tonight. A little bit of an overview and update of where we're at in the planning process. Spend probably a majority of our time talking about engagement. There's been a lot of engagement to support sort of where we're at in this process, and we're going to be doing ongoing engagement as we move forward. And then talk a little bit about what we're calling site frameworks. We don't have specific concepts to present tonight, but we have a really good idea about what those concepts might look like and the scenarios around those, and then a little bit about next steps. So from an overview standpoint, I'm not going to talk too much about this, but I believe all of you know the sites. So Site A, 77-acre undeveloped parcel north of the correctional facility. And then Site B is the 88 acres Ponset Battle Creek Golf Course site. A little bit about how we have presented the idea around a vision or goals for this site. So the next 3 slides are from the county. We had the county board chair present these at our last public meeting. And these sort of start to represent the overall values and or ideas and goals for the project sites moving forward. Just keep in mind, these are really high level community-wide goals, but we're trying to distill these down to inform what we potentially could do on this site. So from the goal standpoint, strengthen individual, family, and community health, safety, and well-being, cultivate economic prosperity and invest in neighborhoods with concentrated financial poverty, enhance access to opportunity and mobility for all residents and businesses, and then model fiscal accountability, transparency, and strategic investments. Next slide is really about the ongoing efforts around Ramsey County focused on economic competitiveness and inclusion. And so there's 2 overriding goals here, and then obviously some strategies. So the first goal is about cultivating economic prosperity and invest in neighborhoods with concentrated financial poverty. So some of the strategies around this is really looking to preserve and increase the supply of rental housing units, foster inclusive development within county transit corridors, expand affordable housing ownership opportunities and housing stability, and then support communities in equitable site development. The second goal, enhance access to opportunity and mobility for all residents and businesses. And then the strategies for this include sustain and accelerate workforce recovery, attract and grow high-wage industrial and innovation types of jobs, develop pathways to entrepreneurship and BIPOC ownership, business ownership, and then strengthen business retention and expansion. And so we utilized not only the primary goals, but then these economic competitiveness and inclusion plan in this process as we start to think about the ideas and development scenarios that we'll be presenting here next month. The last slide is really about the ongoing effort from the county to really improve their parks. So the initiative is called 21st Century Parks Initiatives, and it's really looking to redefine what parks and recreation look like for Ramsey County for the 21st century. Some of the key takeaways, take a residents first approach. So I know that there's a lot of engagement that's going on with this initiative. Engage in authentic and constructive community dialogue, be nimble and responsive, and advance racial health and equity. And so we've also tried to think about what the future uses on these sites might be and how that relates to the opportunity to create, improved open spaces and recreational opportunities for the community. little bit about our project schedule and process. Like I said, we've been at this for a little over 4 months. And as Jeff mentioned, we're about midway through our planning process. But as you can see with the schedule, we still intend to wrap up likely in middle to end of April. And so this is a pretty quick process, at least for phase 2. A lot of this is really just presenting concepts out to the community and then working within the city and the county staffs to kind of be able to pull together a final document that can be presented in April. And so we'll be in sort of the final stages of this project towards the middle of next month. So a little bit about the engagement. What you see here, sorry, I have to move the bar that has the people on it. These are sort of the 4 clusters of engagement that have happened throughout this planning process. So the first box, November to December 2020, you can see some of the engagement efforts that were part of that first month, and that was the first community meeting. There was an online survey, and then we received numerous email responses related to the project after that first community meeting. From January through, I would say, early February, there were stakeholder meetings. These meetings were organized meetings that brought together stakeholders from a county-wide perspective. So we intentionally reached out to representatives to more broadly think about the broader needs within the community. And so I'll go through a list of some of the stakeholders that have been part of those meetings, and we continue to host some of these stakeholder meetings as we move forward in this process. In February, so earlier this month, there was a second community meeting and then a second online survey. And then, as I mentioned, as we move forward, we're continuing to hold these stakeholder meetings, and then there'll be another community meeting in March. So for the first month and a half of the project, here are the 3 major public engagement components. So the first community meeting was held on November 19th. And for those who were on the call, we had about 135 people, and they participated in an engaging online, essentially exercise around visioning for the site. The survey was open from the 19th through the end of the year, so December 31st. And we had 495 responses to that survey. And then subsequently after that first community meeting, we received, it says over 50 individual letters, but I feel like there was more. But we documented all those letters and documented the responses. So some of the things that we asked as part of the community meeting and the survey, for those who were in attendance, we used an online platform called Miro that allowed people to utilize Post-it notes in a virtual format and then move things around and provide responses. And so you can see here some of the questions that were asked. They were really high-level questions just to get a sense of what people thought some of the assets and or challenges might be of the site, what some of the future amenities on the site that could be beneficial to the community, what some of the things on the site that should remain, and then ultimately what is an overall vision for the site. From the survey, it was the same questions, and so this is really a compilation of everything that we heard without showing you the 500 or 600 responses. These are sort of, if you put all these topics into a separate bucket, these are the key elements that we got feedback on. So the first is a lot of feedback regarding appreciation for and protection of natural spaces. So there's a lot of people who believe that the natural environment is really important and it should be enhanced. There was a lot of support for golf. And for those who were on that first meeting, I think the realization was that there was still some questions about how the county made a decision to close the golf course and when was it closed, and the fact that, you know, in the time of COVID, the golf course made the most money it's ever made. So there was a lot of questions around golf that I think have thus been clarified a little bit with an FAQ that the county put out on the golf course. Public recreation ranked pretty high. There was a lot of people that provided thoughts on walking trails and access to these spaces. And then community support land use and food resources, maybe to a lesser extent. So there were individuals that came out that talked about housing and opportunity for housing, as well as the opportunity for community gardens and other types of food security items. And then here, as I mentioned, we also then, outside of the larger public meetings, is that we held individual stakeholder meetings. And so what we did between the city and the county was developed a list of those key organizations that we thought could bring a really unique perspective to this planning process. And so, and we also wanted them to bring a perspective from the county level. So bigger, broader issues that these sites potentially could advance and be part of. And so you can see here, we've held 3 so far, and we're planning at least 1 to 2 more. But just some of the stakeholders that I'm including, so Minnesota Housing Partnership, Ramsey County and City of St. Paul Public Health, City of Maplewood Housing and Economic Development, St. Paul Chamber, the organization Visible City, the Met Council, Twin Cities Land Trust, Institute of the Environment, Friends of the Mississippi, Friends of Maplewood Nature, and then United Hmong Family Incorporated. And then I have a list of some of the others that we're talking to now. So some of the key themes that came out of these stakeholder meetings really focused on these 6 items. So a lot about neighborhood identity, how does the neighborhood relate contextually to not only the city of Maplewood, but much broader? And then what are the opportunities to really think about this neighborhood differently, or these potential developments differently? Mix of housing types and typologies. So the opportunity to think about a wide variety of different housing options within these 2 sites. We heard a lot about food access and community supported agriculture and the importance to many of our minority communities to have those resources. We heard a lot about public transit and multimodal access, a lot about equitable development, which does obviously tie back to even the equitable engagement process. And then we heard a lot about the desire and or the need to do an environmental assessment. And that I think relates to some feelings at Site A, which is the northern parcel, that it's a really rich environmental resource, and that an environmental assessment is necessary to really understand the impacts that development might have on a site like that. Once we got into January, February, there was another community meeting held on January 27th. And for those who attended, there was over 130 people on that one. And we did basically Zoom polling. The questions were a little bit more focused on higher level values. So understanding sort of at the baseline of where everybody is as it relates to some of these bigger, broader topics. And then subsequently, an online survey was available a couple days after and ran through February 14th. And then we received 335 responses from that. So these are basically the questions that were asked as part of both of those meetings, and it was expanded a little bit for the online survey. So for the online survey, we asked about the zip code because we could see that we were hearing a lot from people outside of the city of Maplewood and even those adjacent zip code numbers. And you'll see on the next series of graphics what that represents. But then we talked about job creation and the need for job creation on these sites. We talked about, should these sites increase the overall tax base of the city and the county? We talked about, should these sites be open, accessible to the public, for at least as it relates to open space? We talked about the different types of infrastructure. We talked about different types of development, and is commercial development appropriate on these sites? We talked about housing, and then also public and institutional development. So a lot of different questions that really get to sort of some specific questions that we wanted to have people answer as it relates to future land uses and compatibility of land uses. As it relates to the zip code, for the second survey, we decided just to ask the zip code because I think we realized after the first survey that, especially with the contingent that was focused on the Gulf, that potentially there was not many people from first off, the city of Maplewood and or the adjacent communities that were responding. So what this shows is that, the primary Maplewood zip codes here are 55109, 55119, and 55117. And 55119, there was 25% of those 335 respondents were from Maplewood. And then you could see the 109 was 3.58 and 117 3.58. And then there's another 10% that came from adjacent zip codes. But then when you look at other, so 57% of the responses came from individuals outside of the most immediate adjacent zip codes. And that's just a good number just to keep mind of as we start to I wouldn't say weigh the public engagement, but to just understand, the points of views and where some of these points of views are coming from. Some of the key things that came out of the survey on these two slides here, this one and the next one. The first one, just wanted to call up the job creation and tax base. And as you can see that there was a lot of people that basically said whether they were within the zip codes or outside of the zip codes, that job creation should not be a part of these concept plans. And then as it relates to tax base, either within the zip code surrounding the site or outside of those zip codes, there was overwhelming response that the site should not also increase tax base. And so when we look at those and try to balance those back with the county goals and objectives at a higher level for job creation, equity, housing, these kind of are in conflict of that. A little bit hard to read, but this is sort of the responses that we got in these 4 key categories around open space, commercial development, public institutional, and housing. I'm not going to read through all of them, but you will have this PDF and you can sort of get into a little bit more detail here. But from the standpoint of commercial development, basically the input that we got from the survey said that most people would prefer that it's pretty minimal commercial development. So most people provided either no response or they said, a coffee shop or some sort of small scale commercial development. And then you can see what was not preferred is really large box retail, industrial, neighborhood retail, those kind of elements. So any sort of large commercial use. For public institutional, most people said that a community center maybe could work on the site, maybe a library, but pretty limited response there. And then for housing, it's broken down into sites A and B. So for housing preferred site A, most people said that single family was maybe the highest density of housing that was preferred. And then from outside of the 5 zip codes, you started to get into a little bit more higher density around affordable apartments and workforce. For site B, which is the golf course, most of the adjacent responses were kind of for maybe senior living because it is a little bit of a larger site, and then maybe some affordable apartments. But I think single family was also pretty high in this response. And then outside of the zip codes, you started to see again something pretty similar: affordable apartments and some senior living. For site A, as it relates to housing, which is not preferred. Most people said anything that's really dense. So luxury apartments, market rate apartments, affordable housing, not preferred. And then for site B, not preferred is getting into affordable apartments, workplace apartments, and luxury apartments. So the big takeaway here, I think, as it relates to housing is that for site A, B, most people preferred that single family, smaller density is likely most preferred, even though site B, you started to see some affordable apartments and things creeping in. And then for things that were not preferred were basically anything that was higher density. So as we continue to move forward here, as I mentioned, and I'll highlight the next public meeting will be in March, but we also are still continuing to hold some of these focused stakeholder meetings. So these are some of the groups that we have set meetings up with coming up in the next couple of weeks. You can imagine it's challenging to pull together a lot of these individuals, but so St. Paul Indians in Action, we have a meeting set up with them. Among 18 Council, we have a meeting set up with them. And then we're working on meetings with these other groups, including Ramsey County Equity Action Circle and their broad network, the Community Stabilization Project and the African American Leadership Forum and St. Paul Promise Network. So still a lot of broader countywide conversations to be had as we move forward. All right, so now we transition into the site frameworks. So at this point, as we continue to do engagement, we're getting ready for a meeting in March, and we are hoping to present a range of different development scenarios for each of the sites. As it relates to what we're calling site frameworks, this is what we are proposing to be included on any concept that gets pushed forward. And so I'll read through this, and then maybe this is something we can come back and talk about a little bit later. But For sites, both sites A and B, we think that these are all elements that should be included. So publicly accessible open space via some sort of trail network, community space for gardening or urban agriculture, preservation of ecologically sensitive areas and enhanced ecological systems. So, those areas on these sites that are sensitive or high value ecological areas we should preserve. Enhanced stormwater management, improved access and connectivity to transit, and then context sensitive design. And that primarily maybe relates to adjacent land uses, adjacent areas. To give you a little bit of primer, I'm not going to go in detail on these analysis, but what we did was, there's a lot of analysis that's been generated, but these are some of the key things that I wanted to highlight tonight. So major employment districts, a lot of this is being skewed by 3M, but there is some employment within the area in close proximity. Racial ethnic diversity. So generally, most of the residents within the 2-mile radius are predominantly white, so 65%. But I think primarily to the west of our sites, there is a large BIPOC community, so 17% Black, 9% Asian, 4% Latino. And then there's some great market analysis as it relates to this site. Access to major highway systems and road networks, access to major commercial areas, proximity to downtown St. Paul, and then proximity to really wonderful open space network and trails, obviously Battle Creek Regional Park, directly adjacent to Site A. So we also, as part of our analysis, we went and looked at the regional context and then zoomed down to the site. And then these are some site-specific analysis that I think are important to this conversation, because what we wanted to do was just really show what we thought was the most developable part of each site. So for Site A, the 77 acres you can see here, this represents wetland classifications and setbacks. So the blue areas are basically wetlands or water bodies, and then the blue dash is a setback. So we're not going to be developing inside of those blue dashes. So that's what Site A looks like. And then Site B, for those who have played the Ponds Golf Course, that there is a lot of water and wetlands out there. We also looked at soils. So green, yellow, probably our best soils. Red's a little bit more challenging to develop on. So you can see on Site A, and then Site B. Steep slopes. So generally we're going to be looking for development in those areas identified as green. Just makes it a lot simpler. Not that we can't in yellow and red, but it just becomes much more challenging. You can develop maybe roads and trails in the red, but for housing, it's going to be pretty challenging. So here's Site B. So this is essentially classification of natural areas on the site. So you can see Site A, there's definitely some natural areas that potentially need to be looked at to be preserved. And then Site B to a lesser extent, primarily because it's a golf course, but you can see there's a couple of areas, some purple areas and some yellow areas and the brown areas on the south end of the site. And then that sort of leaves you with sort of a development framework. So, so what we're showing here is in the white, generally, we feel like those are the areas of the site that are probably most apt for development, just based on all of the existing conditions. And so, on Site A, which 77 acres, we're looking at approximately 44 acres of that. And then Site B, again, the white acres or the white areas are largely the areas that are easier to be developed. And so you can see on Site B, it's probably about 40 acres. And primarily everything that is south of the existing clubhouse will be pretty challenging from a slope and water standpoint. So that gets us to these development scenarios. As I mentioned, we don't have concepts as of yet, but we are really leaning towards developing concepts that align with these scenarios. So what you're seeing here is a continuum. And so for Site A, we're looking to develop and present 4 concepts for Site A, and the concepts would really focus on these 4 components on this continuum. So the first concept would be a no-build concept. So this would be literally leave the site as is. It doesn't give any thoughts or any recommendations on, if it becomes park or open space or what. It's just no build. Second would be a cluster development. So if you can imagine smaller single family lots that are clustered into small nodes, sort of with common road network and open space. And then we'd be looking to preserve open space outside of that, add public trails, and then include some sort of community garden agriculture piece. Scenario 3 would be maybe more traditional in the sense of what you would think of as a single family neighborhood in a suburb. So single family residential lots, I think in this concept, we'd be looking to mix sizes of lots. So smaller lots, maybe a little bit more affordable, maybe a little bit larger lots just to get a variety of different housing types and maybe a little bit different densities from the standpoint of, maybe some row homes, maybe some townhomes, and then maybe some single family. But again, also preserving open space, adding public trails and community garden. And then the last concept will probably be the most dense of all the concepts. So we think that likely there'll be a combination of, again, still some single family, larger and small lots, some townhomes, and then maybe 1 or 2 apartment buildings, just because I think the site could allow for that to happen. But then preserving open space, adding public trails, and then maintaining community garden agriculture. So if you can go back and remember that development potential for site A, all of that potentially would just happen in the white. Now I'll go to development scenarios for site B. Oh, sorry. So for site B, we think these are what the 4 concepts will be that we'll present. The first will be to remain as a golf course. So no change to the infrastructure of the existing golf course, and that would be an option. Second, we're calling urban reserve. The thought is that we'd maybe maintain the clubhouse and the golf range as a recreational amenity. And then we would do something similar to the previous concept that was more of a cluster development and have some single family residential, maybe some multiple sizes. Primarily it will be located north of the clubhouse. And then we'd be preserving and enhancing the open space, adding public trails, and then also adding space for community garden agriculture. I think the clubhouse and the current parking, in addition to the golf range, could support other community uses like a community garden. The third one is a village, so starting to get a little bit more dense. Again, starting to look at maybe a mix of different housing types and income levels. So some smaller lot single family, probably some townhomes, and then including also then enhanced open space, public trails, and community garden. And then the neighborhood center one would be probably the most dense of any of the concepts for either site. More mixes of land uses likely have more higher density, which would be on the north side of the site. It could include a grocery store. If we talk more broadly about community ag and gardening, grocery store could be something that could be valuable there. I see a mix of vertical uses, so maybe some retail and some office on the first level, and then residential above. So there could be some minor job creation on the site, and then again preserving open space, the public trails, and community ag. So, and when I say dense, the site itself, again, if we're only looking at 40 acres, you can see where my pointer is in this area. There's not really a lot of places to put in, a lot of larger buildings, and so, but there is some space to do a little bit more density on this site. So that's the approach to present scenarios, and for our next meeting with the larger community, we will be having these concepts drawn up. So another thing to think about when we talk about these concepts is that we have been partnering with the U of M Institute of the Environment. They have been on collaborating with us for probably a little bit over 2 months. And so with them, we've developed this scorecard. So we want to create a subjective way to really understand the impacts of these concepts on not only the city, but also the county. And so I didn't put the scorecard in here because it's kind of tough to read and it's really small text, but these are the 6 key categories that the scorecard will focus on. So housing, recreation, transportation, cultural services, government revenue, so tax base, those kind of things, and then economic well-being. We feel like these 6 categories really align well with the county's goals and the overall writing values for the site. but this will allow us the opportunity to subjectively sort of rank and evaluate these concepts as we move forward. So a good example of this would be Site A, and the fact that one of the concepts will be sort of a no build. So even if you think about adding public trails to that site, that starts to get into ranking higher than a no build concept, because it goes towards recreation. I think it kind of goes to transportation to some extent. And so that's maybe not a good example of what we're trying to do here, but so this scorecard is going to be available, and the Institute for the Environment is going to run a whole bunch of different sort of high level analysis of our concepts. And then we'll be able to sort of have these outputs that sort of rank the value that each of these concepts brings to the broader city and to the county. So next steps. So I'm just about done. So obviously you can go out to the city's website and you can get an update of everything I sort of talked about today. There's a lot more information out there as it relates to the presentations and the analysis graphics. And you can access that information there. We're really focused in now on community meeting number 3 being March 10th. I think that's the meeting date and time that works for the city and the county. And so we are organizing and coordinating that now. As I mentioned, we're continuing to have these broader conversations with some of the more diverse stakeholder groups within the community who bring maybe a more regional or countywide perspective to this process. And then the hope is that we will wrap up this report in April. So we're looking towards the mid to later end of April to finish up this report. And with that, that is everything I have.
Thank you, Mr. Slack. Next, I would like to introduce Commissioner Victoria Reinhardt. If you would unmute yourself, if you'd like to share with us some of your thoughts. And then after this, we'll go to council questions.
Thank you, Mayor Abrams. I am very impressed with the work of Perkins and Will and how they were able to navigate, some pretty challenging times. I mean, with COVID and trying to figure out how you get community engagement that's really viable and valuable isn't easy. This is the first time I've seen, obviously, the update, and I was very impressed with it. I really like the idea of the scorecard and it being developed through the U of M. And I just really am looking forward to March 10th and when the final recommendations come out so that we can work together in partnership with the city of Maplewood to make the highest and best use of these 2 properties. And I do want to stress that it is both properties, Site A and Site B, and that any of the wetlands will be protected and preserved regardless of what combination goes in. I know there's been a lot of questions about that, and I just want to make that very clear. With that, I will listen to the questions, and if there's something that you need to call me back in on, you just let me know. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's go to council questions. Councilmember Cave. Questions for Mr. Thompson, Mr. Slack, or Commissioner Reinhardt?
Right now I don't have many questions. I just have a couple comments. I thought the online survey that the questions you asked the citizens were they were in depth and to the point, and it really kept everything moving because you didn't have too broad of questions that you had to keep narrowing down. And I really appreciated that because I think that gets this process rolling. The potential design ideas, I'm excited to see those. I think having nothing done on either property is not potentially what I see envisioning there. And partnering with Ramsey County to see this whole thing through, I think is an excellent idea. And coming together and working through this, it looks like the concept is, working with the community and actually having a group put together all the questions they've had, but know how to ask what really is viable out there instead of saying the whole piece and break it down, showing people really what parcels can be used that aren't protected with the wetlands. Really, it kind of limits what you can do on there, but you have to make, the best decisions on the property that we have. So I think this is really valuable, and I can't wait till the end of the March meeting, or actually in April, to see what the outcome is. So great job, guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Juniman.
Thank you, Mayor. Another great job by Perkins and Will, might I say. There's a lot of information in that report tonight, and I'm still trying to digest some of it. I do have a question, though, since from the University of Minnesota, there were those 6 basic concepts, and one of them was transportation. And I have a question for John on how realistic is public access transportation on particularly the south site, both now and with what's planned for the area. Can you further define that at all at this point or not?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question, council member. And, I think part of the challenge is that Site A is not, or Site B is not served by transit. Site A is served by transit, and the transit sort of ends at the corrections facility. And so that's an important ongoing conversation, I think, that needs to be had, and ultimately could tie back to some of the recommendations about, further conversations or further studies working with Metro Transit Met Council to think about what transit service looks like to these sites in the future. And so that's a great question. It's on our minds, and we're sort of working through that right now.
Thank you. Because I think that's one of the things that was thrown out fairly early in this, just when ideas were being thrown around before we even got into the engagement process, and to recommend particularly affordable housing for the larger site, or for the pond site. In my mind, doesn't make a whole lot of sense if we don't think transportation is going to get any better than it is now.
Yep.
That's sort of, it's not even pie in the sky. It just doesn't seem logical to me. And I think I'm asking about when you come up with the more specifics in April. I love the site plans, by the way, and how you overlay things. It's really helpful. But will there be more specific numbers for the different concepts? Because I think, sometimes when you start saying apartment building or density, or big red lights go off in some people's heads. And
Yep.
so if you know what that means for each site, it will help people envision what it could be like and still contain the amenities, including the open space type piece that everybody's wanting.
Yes. So another great point. The scorecard, the intention of the scorecard is be able to evaluate what those improvements look like. And so the example that I gave, and maybe again not the best example, was just as simple as trail network. So on Site A, it's just open space. You can imagine going from a Site A no build concept to a concept that just has maybe some limited single family, but a trail system. So the scorecard is going to allow us to actually put in the number of lineal feet of trail and give an evaluation of the added benefit that brings to the city and the county. So you can scale that up. You can think about housing numbers, so that the scorecard will input housing numbers. It'll input areas of community agriculture and gardening, and it'll input sort of all of those metrics that we've identified, and sort of the output will be some sort of numerical and hopefully an objective sort of summary or evaluation of each of these concepts and the value that it does bring back to the communities. And as you saw there, one of the areas that we're going to actually focus on is tax base. So it's going to provide a number back out of what the potential increase of tax base might be. The scorecard, we had the scorecard in there, but it's just so hard to read and understand. So I decided just to put in, just the 6 topics, and but you will be able to see the scorecard at the next meeting, because I think we want to show sort of how all the inputs were put in and then what the outcomes are. So we'll probably just flash it up, but the scorecard will also be in the final document, so you can have a better understanding of those metrics.
Yeah, thanks. And I wasn't saying we should see it now. I'm just wanting to sure that in the final report, there'll be some hints at least at numbers, so that people can envision, if we develop on those sites and in the spots that were white on your maps, that, what that would look like. Because it helps people a lot to understand that what you told them is still important, because as you pointed out, there was a lot of appreciation of nature and the open space and that type of thing. And so to realize that you might be able to partially develop a piece of the site and retain a certain amount of that is important if we're going to meet community expectation.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Another great report.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Knudsen.
Don't have a lot. It's just kind of a fascinating project in the sense it started out kind of an economic concern for golf. And then it's moving to an open book, more or less, where you look at some of the options include trails and open spaces. And then development, you'd think, if the economics were the concern to begin with, that you'd want kind of full tilt development. But this is an amazing, remarkable project because it, usually you kind of think of if you want to control something, own it. Whereas the owners are saying, work with me to figure this thing out. So it's great. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Councilmember Villavicencio.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess my comments and questions would echo what Councilmember Juniman said. My first thought was I really appreciate the report. It was really easy to understand. My obvious thoughts and comments were along what Councilmember Juniman said about the transportation, and just thinking about if we are doing more dense development, does that mean we'll have to create more bus stops and things like that? Or is it just going to be developed in the sense of having the system the way it is? And as Juniman said, I don't think that would work. The other concern I have obviously is environmental. And I was pleased to hear that County Commissioner Reinhardt said that the wetlands will be protected. And I think that's a really important aspect that we need to make sure that we protect, as it's something that, we all really enjoy and appreciate about Maplewood. Thank you.
I want to thank everyone for the presentation as well. I think it's very helpful. I think that there is still a lot of work to be done, and I am looking forward to the next public engagement opportunity. I would invite my fellow council members to join that meeting. I wrote down that it's scheduled right now for March 10th. Does anyone have a time for that? Has that been decided, Mr. Slack or Mr. Thompson?
Likely same time frame that we have been doing. So I think it's been 4 to 6. Is that correct, Jeff?
Yes.
Yep. So I think the thought is that it would be the same time frame, and then March 10th is sort of the date that we have zeroed in on.
Okay. So I would invite my fellow council members, because ultimately, as the zoning authority for the property, it's going to be very important to hear and to understand what our residents are suggesting and what their wishes are. So I would encourage you all to put that on your calendar. And I'm also looking forward to the report that you're going to be submitting both to Ramsey County and to the Maplewood City Council. So thank you all. And with that, council members, we don't have anything else on our agenda. Thank you, Commissioner Reinhardt, for joining us as well. And with that, council members, I am going to adjourn our workshop, and we will reconvene at 7 o'clock for our city council meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.